What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. Today, we are back with yet another mission breakdown. We just played some more 40k ourselves. We played at some GTs, and we decided we're gonna start just leaning more into it on the series on what people are seeing the most of, because we want to help you guys be ready as soon as possible. In with that in mind, we're going to be talking today about priority assets versus take and hold, two of the most common missions that people are playing. So let's go ahead, let's dive on in. What are we looking at, Phil? What's the mission?
Yeah, so we'll just do a quick reminder. If you want a full breakdown of the missions, we have a whole nother series breaking down each mission and then the matchups. But this is just to serve as a reminder. Inescapable Dominion, which is the take and hold mission, you get control 3 or more objectives at the end of your turn. You get 4 VP. End of your command phase, you control 2 or more objectives. It's 5. You control more objectives than your opponent. It's 4. And then you control your opponent's home. End of the battle. That is worth 5 VP. On the priority asset side, it is the action secure assets. If your friendly unit secures the asset this turn, it's worth 4, and then one or more units that started this turn within range of one or more central objectives are destroyed. It's 2 VP, and then end of your command phase, you control one or more objectives, standard, control an objective on the board, and then if you control 3 or more, it's 4 VP. And the action, just for those that need a refresher, it's in your shooting phase. It's one friendly unit within range of one objective. It does not say, like a lot of these objectives will say that, actions will say that you don't have to control the objective when you start the action. You can only do this once per turn. And then at the end of your turn, it does say specifically that if your unit controls this action or this objective, the action completes and secures the asset. So right off the bat, we have an action-focused secondary, which is very common for priority assets. And then for the take and hold side, we have a very, very straightforward, just control objectives.
Yeah, there's definitely multiple layers here as we're talking about this mission. One of the big things that I feel like is there's a lot more, as Phil was just saying, terms and conditions, right? You need to be holding stuff, you need to be killing stuff, and you need to be actioning as the priority player. And then, as always, take and hold likes to just go and sit on objectives and try to keep those under control. So to start with, what we'll do is we'll talk about adding these up, right? What are we looking at for a total score? Reliably, right? That top line of take and hold, you should be able to go control 3 or more objectives. There are 4 in No Man's Land. It does count your home, so you can very easily step on 2 objectives for most of your list builds. That's going to be pretty reliable. 4 rounds of 5, we're already at 20, right? That is like a solid baseline of primary. This is an extremely low bar to get halfway to your max almost. And then going forward, end of your command phase, you control 2 or more objectives, or you control more objectives than your opponent. Those do stack. You can get both, but let's say your opponent is able to deny you, right? But as long as you hold your natural and as long as you hold your home, that is another 20 points, right? That is such an insanely low bar to get to 40 points that if you can ever just knock your opponent off or maybe have some battle shock tricks to prevent them from technically holding some things, or maybe a good rapid ingress even, you really have the chance to just get the extra 4 points at some point and already be at 44 primary. Like, it is so easy to max this out. I played priority this last weekend, and playing against take and hold, it felt so hard to try to keep up with them on primary. If they are able to pressure you, to jail you, to make it hard to do your action and try to hold, if you're running lower on resources, I think take and hold just is in such a good spot in this mission compared to secure assets, which we'll talk about now. End of your turn, hold 4, or a friendly unit did the action, 4 points. You're going to get that, right? This is going to put you at the exact same 20. Killing a unit that is on 1 or more central objectives is actually much harder than it seems if the take and hold player knows what they're doing. Like, there's very low reason for them to actually go and get on the middle unless they're like going to trade and do things like that. I played some pretty good players with take and hold this last weekend, and they're always a split. They would run units down the middle between the gap to stay off of the objectives, to where it's in the area, but it's a problem I still have to deal with it, but I can't score those extra 2 points. And in this matchup, it's so much harder to keep up with how low of a bar take and hold scoring is, that it made a big difference. But let's say you are able to get that 4 times, right? That's 8 VP. which is, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it definitively adds up, especially when we consider that our hold 1 or hold 3 or more objectives actually still scores us less points than their hold 1 hold more, or their hold 2 hold more. So it really feels like you're kind of on the back foot playing priority assets, but there are ways to try to make up for that, and we will talk about that for sure. Yeah, we'll do the math real quick though. If you are able to control 1 or more objectives for the 4 turns, you're gonna be able to do that 4 times. That's 16, and then in the final battle round, definitively, you should be trying to keep enough resources, since it scores at the bottom of your turn, to get that extra 6. So that is 20 there. So you can get 20 off that. You can secure. But if they are able to deal with your action economy, it really, really gets tough to keep up with take and hold.
Yeah, it definitely does not feel as guaranteed as Take and Hold did to try to get that 3 or more objectives when you're playing against an army that is specifically built for the purpose of, into every single disposition, controlling objectives. And that is what they are looking to do in every matchup. Priority has to have a little bit of play into some other things, and they have to, you have to build your list in said way. So it is definitely interesting to see. So yeah, it is a challenge, and let's go over some deployments. Let's go over some maps and see how priority versus take and hold is going to go. So Lane is going to take the priority side, since that's what he played all weekend, and I'll take the take and hold side, and we'll kind of break down what each player needs to be thinking about as they deploy.
So I did not have the pleasure of playing on this one. I played on layout C, I think, both times this weekend, unfortunately, but I would have preferred this one. I like this one a little bit more. I guess I played on B 1 of the 3 times that I played it. But this is a better map in my opinion. The Crucible deployment gives you a little more access to be able to kind of turn the table or pull some more shenanigans and really, really get into your opponent. And it feels a lot easier to potentially kind of hold that center a little better because of the proximity of your own natural to that center objective. It makes it feel a little easier for you to be able to try to hold that third objective on this board without, because you can still just threaten those board edges a little bit better on this one. I feel like it can make it a little bit more challenging for a take and hold player to really deny you going for that extra hold.
Yeah, absolutely fair. There's some things on this deployment that I think are really interesting, specifically are for like reactive move units. So because this angle is so tight here, I definitely think there's a world where like a 5-man with a reactive could very easily position itself on this side of the wall as the priority assets player, as the take and hold player. Like it's going to apply for every layout, but unfortunately the distance here, or fortunately enough, it's less than 6 inches. So like right off the bat, if I'm looking at, an infiltrator or a reactive, we can very easily put ourselves in a position where like we can force multiple ways of, hey, this is less than 8 inches, which the majority of reactives, that is the distance that triggers it, and say, okay, I can be on this wall. You probably put this one even closer because it's, that's a dense terrain. You put it all the way up against the wall as close as you can. You pre-measure all of this terrain because these angles are so tight. And you say, okay, well, I'm going to drop my reactive move unit right here. And then if you come and try to get any angle on me, I can very easily react it back behind and touch the other piece of terrain, still maintaining hidden, still maintaining a good amount of distance because you just reactive move 6 and still controlling potentially that objective. And this is more important for the priority player versus the take and hold player, because obviously the take and hold player doesn't necessarily love giving 2 points if you kill a unit on central objective. But if the act of doing that prevents you from getting shot at all, period, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is we kind of need to talk a little bit, I think, more about how take and hold maybe wants to play this, because I think priority has to be trying to counter the easier play pattern that take and hold is going to want to play, and that's, for one, staying off of the center. If you as the take and hold player can just hold your natural and then continuously keep pressuring their natural a lot more often. If you can do those denials and then just shoot them off of center objectives or not actually end on them, you're just literally turning off access to one of their 8 VP throughout their mission. And so as the priority assets player, right, we need to be trying to say, okay, am I playing an army that is shooting or is melee. If it's melee, right, let's make sure we're always putting our important assets on center objectives as they try to deal with things, right? If you know you're going to have to give it up as a piece in a trade, try to do it in a way where, okay, well, I'm going to go and I have to peek to see this thing. I want to make sure I'm putting it on a center objective in a spot where I know the World Eaters player is going to have to come charge me and leave a unit on this objective, right? I think we have to be mindful of setting ourselves up for future scoring. And maybe you're playing against a Tau player. You're going to have to do maybe some more measuring and stuff, but being like, okay, well, the only way to actually get within X distance is either you're going to get even closer to me or you're going to have to be on this terrain to draw this specific line. That's the only line you can draw. And that does seem very tedious, but trying to make those plays and pressure your opponent to give you things to go interact with on the center or just not deal with you at all is one of those things as a priority player you have to be looking to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So as the take and hold player, right? It's gonna sound relatively straightforward, but this is like our bread and butter, right? We've talked about it in 10th edition. We talked about it in 11th edition. Whether it's shooting or combat, I'm playing this pocket and I have to keep this pocket incredibly safe. So I'm looking to screen out even further than I need to. I need to make sure I constantly can reload units into this cell to make sure I can go after my opponent's expansion because ideally that is the best place to do it. If I can physically trade on this objective, it's even better for me, especially if it means denying my opponent the act of holding two or holding more, and I want to be able to continually do that. So, what units do I, as the take and hold player, need to be looking at? Well, I need to be looking at units that, if I'm running a combat army, do they have advance and charge and good OC, right? Do they have a reactive move? Do they have ways to maintain hidden or go to ground, right? Is this going to be a combat unit that never shoots their gun? And that way, when I come in here and after I consolidate back and I go touch this wall again, because I can go in any direction that I want, like, am I making sure that even if I could get back to the other side of the wall, line them up all along this edge and say, okay, now they have go to ground. Now they have hidden. I have great OC on this objective. This is exactly what I'm doing, right? That's Terminators with a banner. That's, demons. That's orcs, right? Like big bricks of boys, all of those things that do take and hold really, really well. I'm constantly, I have to, most important thing is keeping this safe. I cannot allow the priority player to push me out further than this, preventing me from getting on this objective. And honestly, that's what the priority player, in my mind, needs to be able to do. You need to keep this objective safe. And you unfortunately are probably going to end up doing that by sacrificing an asset prematurely. So the priority asset player, who should be running a little bit more trash, needs to push out to the point that they can actually keep this thing safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other big thing is understanding the threats that are available to against your army, right? If I know I am playing somebody who isn't uber fast, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go push my Bulgrin out onto that center objective as the take and hold player, right? If you don't have something because of how hidden and gone to ground works that can actively knock them out, I'm going to go put the very, very hard thing to kill out there because your scouts, your little tradey early pieces, your JPIs aren't going to come actually remove me from that objective. And I am threatening to potentially hold more if I am playing it right. And that is a really big deal for me, right? If I can just threaten to keep kind of taking space and making it very hard for that priority player to really, really remove me, all while I'm just taking ground, I think that's a very, very good thing. On the flip side, all right, maybe your opponent is fairly fast, but if you can get them down to the point where if they want to get that kill, if they want the 2 points, they're going to have to go just kill one really small unit, right? I've got just some cheap trash. That's all they can really get into. And they're going to have to trade a very expensive unit for my cheap unit, all for the sake of those 2 VP that turn, right? So understanding those tempo, like micro plays, is another great tool for the take and hold player.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so there's some other things on this board that really stand out, Lane, that I think, if I'm a take and hold or priority player, I need to be looking at, which is our long shooting lanes down the sides of this board, right? Down the sides of this board, that is a huge distance to cover. Problem is, it's not going into anything actually impactful, right? Like, yes, it is a long shooting lane, but it is not a long shooting lane that necessarily goes into objectives, goes into, good staging points or anything like that. These lanes are open, but they're relatively cut off. When we talk about the actual midboard, all these spaces are pretty secure in terms of where we could put units, right? Like, if I have units in the pocket between these two, it is actually relatively safe. I'm forcing my opponent, let's say I'm the take and hold player. I could be off the objective, off the central objective, threatening my opponent's central objective, but also like my opponent actually has to put something real as long as I pre-measure and draw some lines that they're not actually going to reasonably get into this. And it gets even worse if I start touching terrain and I get hidden because this line here, for example, like that is 26 inches. You have to get within 15 of my infantry beast or swarm that's touching this objective to get around hidden. That is not a reasonable thing. So your other options are, well, I have to play like inside the pocket and be really aggressive with my shooting unit that probably isn't, the greatest at combat, and putting myself in a position where all of my opponent's great staging locations are right behind the central objective, behind our deployment zone, in this tiny L, right? Like all of those places are great, but as the take and hold player, I could very easily put something in this line and try to draw my opponent in to play a little bit closer to me, which as the take and hold player, a lot of the times I'm looking to do because I
Yeah.
want to be able to flip and take assets off the board.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things we usually talk about, we haven't got to yet, is where are we infiltrating, Phil? Where are we looking to take some of that initial space? I know where you're going, as always, but we still need to go over it. Make sure everybody kind of has some ideas of places that are really good to take space on this mission, particularly.
Yeah, so the first one obviously is inside this pocket. We talked about it for the take and hold player. We can very aggressively get off and get after our opponent's natural objective, but I think there's some other really interesting ones that stand out. First of all, as let's say I'm the red player, I think actually infiltrating on this pocket and touching all of this terrain is very, very reasonable. If it's a cheap, durable asset, maybe it pushes our opponent's own infiltrate back. This is a really, really good location, especially if it means denying our opponent the obvious, get inside this pocket with their own unit as well. So I really like that as a denial piece. It's very interesting because it means that it is very hard to challenge, and you could very easily do it just on this side as well, trying to capitalize on the dense terrain, gaining the go to ground, which is nice. The other spot I think is actually a little subjective, but depending on the type of army you're running, I think infiltrating right along this wall on the far side, kind of like I was just talking about now, of just saying, okay, well, I can infiltrate here. I'll have hidden. You do have to come out as the take and hold player, and I'm trying to get the tempo going early and get rid of some of these pieces. And I can very easily threaten my opponent's first action, and trying to take all of this space to make sure that my opponent can't do that first action, which is a very easy way to deny initially.
Yeah, I think that's honestly one of the other things I kind of noticed throughout the weekend is because and maybe this is false, but because area denial switched to center ground, people have like kind of forgotten to keep things close to the center to deny your opponent scoring that secondary.
Mm.
I've seen a lot less people infiltrating near the center, and they're doing some of these edge plays, which I still think have a ton of value, right? Especially if you can have high enough OC trash that can just go, deny your opponent's natural, really cheap, really easy turn one. It makes it a lot easier. I like putting stuff on the center in here as well, kind of where Phil was talking about. But the other reason I like it is you can force them to have to put something even on their side of the board on their center objective, right? If I just start my 5 rattlings where Phil put that unit right in the middle and then I just run them over, they have gone to ground, they're right below that L on the right middle objective, they're just nice and hidden. I can be like, well, I still have 5 OC on here. You have to, put something on here or deal with this asset, and it can help me get the game going if that's the tempo I want to set. So I really, really like that as a position as well on here.
Yeah. Yeah, this map is very interesting. I think, it can definitely favor the combat armies because you have these great staging locations. These center ruins are very close together, and it's very easy to just stand off this profile, right? And if we talk about distances, that's 16 inches. So, anything with advance and charge, anything with, jump packs, anything with good movement that moves base 8, base 10, they're closing this gap
Pass.
without even breaking a sweat. So,
Yeah.
That's not even saying that they can't even fit inside this pocket. If the unit can hide inside here and get go to ground, and then now they're charging into everything, like a halfway decent combat unit is gonna do that every single time. So like it feels like a combat focused board. These shooting lanes that are running the edge of this table, they're not going to make the biggest impact on this game. They can, right? You still potentially with some armies want to be able to control these lanes. It's very, very important that in some matchups, like you have to be able to punish your opponent. Like if we talk about knights, if we talk about, big bugs and nids, we talk about necrons with, Catans, like you have to be able to hit them multiple times in a lot of armies before you go into combat with them. Otherwise you will just lose into these bigger stat checks. Space
Yeah.
Wolf Terminators as well. Like, how do you deal with those? Because you're constantly going to get hit over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's 100% fair. I think the other thing that I'd like to talk about is where are we staging some of our vehicles, right? As we've talked about, we need to be ready to threaten those board edges, but it's also we want to be able to go tag some of these middle ruins to draw some good lines of sight.
Yeah. Yeah, so the easiest one obviously is down here on this bottom side, right? This gives us a lot of flexibility of being able to touch into this terrain and then say, okay, well, I can draw, line of sight most likely into, a lot of the things that I actually want to shoot, right? I can cover this line down here into like drawing onto the corners here and here. Like I can cover some of those things. It's almost better if I wanted to come up here and touch, take advantage of a taller model and still shoot down these angles and try to start punishing things that are touching these objectives. It is a very tight line, but it does give us supporting fire into our own central objective if we were pressured or our opponent was trying to pressure us off it.
Yep. Yeah, very flexible. And if somebody brings something in around the edge of the board, you can easily respond to that, obviously. And then the other place that you can also move up from there is just right behind that center objective. Very safe and still very flexible. Just rotating in behind there, and you just are able to threaten so much of the board, especially if you are pretty fast and you plan to use your rotate. Like you can even tag into that center ruin driving across the midboard without too much effort with moderately fast pieces, because it's really not that far to get there. And you also, if you really lean towards the other edge of that ruin, towards the top, there is a chance that with maybe like an advance and shoot unit or something a little faster, you can go tag into their little L that's up there and even threaten units back there. So it's really, 10-inch move, right? Like it's
Yep.
not horrible to get back in there to threaten stuff. And then obviously staging behind your own natural, that's a very, very safe pocket. Lets you kind of step into that same firing lane to really deal with anything that may have shot or is standing on their side of the center, or also go out and deal with stuff on the board edge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have to be a little bit more focused with our shooting assets. It's not as obvious where those things are. You really are playing around the terrain. You're playing around trying to be as aggressive with the lanes as possible. There is a world where, depending on the size of your shooting asset, you could run down this edge and draw lines down through the middle and try to get after your opponent's, middle objective. It is a very tight line, but that's the 11th edition layouts now is you kind of got to be a little bit more innovative with how you're going to incorporate some of these big shooting assets into the game.
Yep. And one of the best places I think you can put some of your bigger assets is off the board. Making your opponent wonder about where you're going to rapid ingress, still one of the best strats in the game, or even just with shooting assets in particular, just showing up on a turn. If they're not careful, if they're not screening stuff out, judging by, we'll say the bottom of the board, right? We'll say you're the red player and you're trying to attack their natural. With only having to be outside of 8, you can actually see onto quite a bit of that objective just by pulling in and driving in within 6 inches of the bottom of this board and see very far into their natural and stuff. And if you need to be a little bit, you realize you're going to have to come a little bit more up the board. If you rapid ingress because they don't have anything that's threatening that outside shooting lane, you can rapid ingress a tank kind of right behind your little L at the bottom of the middle of the board and then just drive it right onto that objective and see
Yeah.
everything inside of it.
Yeah.
I really, really had the most success this weekend just keeping things off the board because it's so hard in a game that's much more fast paced and feels like you're already just trading things so much faster threatening to bring in an asset turn 3, 2 and 3 technically, you're just making your opponent use so much more resources to really protect their goods. And so I don't know, I think keeping stuff off the side of the board is just a huge part of 11.
Rapid Ingress is still the best strat in the game. I think Lane and I both agree.
Yeah. Okay, anything else for layout A, or are we ready for B?
Let's get on to B.
Hell yeah. This one is it's really thick. Like that's just like the best way to say it. It's just it feels so much less maneuverable because of the way the dense terrain pieces line up across this board. It's got a lot of choke points in it that just makes it feel a lot harder to play on. But it is easier to hide on, so it has pros and cons for both players. As the take and hold player, Phil, what are some of your priorities on your checklist of, like where are you infiltrating? What are you prioritizing on what part of the boards you're trying to, control early and throughout the game?
Yeah, so the one thing I'm actually trying to control relatively early, and I think it's actually really important in this, if I was the red player looking at this board, my opponent actually cannot easily get from this staging area all the way across into, let's say, a 5-man that I have on the other side. That is not a reasonable thing to do in the span of one turn. It gets very, very difficult. You have to have a very dedicated speed piece that has the capabilities to pick up some of these smaller trading pieces to actually come out here and do this. So like this off the bat feels very, very easy. And I actually don't want my opponent to infiltrate here, potentially preventing that from happening. Because if you look, this wall goes all the way across. So, if the TOs have the terrain as this is, even if it was shorter, it's not the end of the world. This infiltrating spot is actually really important, actually more important than putting them inside this pocket, because as you'll see here, I'll put on a nice little measurement here, 8 inches, and that's 9 right there. You can't deploy within 8 inches or infiltrate within 8 inches of your opponent's deployment zone. So like this spot is already safe. There is no point in, not to say no point, it doesn't benefit you as much infiltrating there initially. There's a huge amount of benefit infiltrating here and then having it backed up with something else, whether it be a shooting asset or another combat asset that I am literally putting like here on this objective and then touching this terrain, and I'm just dotting them all around on this corner all the way through just to make sure that they're going to be in a position to support this unit. But like that is probably one of the most important positioning for infiltrate, just because of how difficult it is for our opponent. Because believe it or not, like if our opponent deploys here on this edge, this isn't the safest place to be. Right, there are assets that are going to use this board edge or use this terrain and touch this terrain and then shoot anything that's back here. Because if they try to run their unit here and I have a halfway decent speed shooting asset, like, a land speeder by chance, I could very easily go after some of these early trading pieces and pick them off before you're actually able to interact with them. Because all I need to do is touch this piece of terrain and now I have full line of sight to everything that's behind it. So the majority of opponents, depending on the unit, will run those units here behind this objective. So like that for me as a take and hold player, super, super important. It doesn't necessarily have to be on this objective depending on what my opponent has. You could very easily do it running along this side if you wanted to give yourself a little bit more space. You also could do it touching this objective, right? And then run them along here, because all you're doing is playing the game of, hey, I actually want you to come out and try to deal with maybe this super tough, durable infiltrating unit or scouting unit, and I need your assets. So you're forced to make a decision between doing the action and, preventing me from tabling you. Because honestly, as the take and hold player, that's a lot of the times what I'm doing. I'm looking to flip your objective, kill an important unit, and deny you primary. And if I can, and I'm doing all 3 of those things while I'm doing the one thing that I need to do for my disposition, which is just control freaking objectives. So that's why take and hold is so popular, because it's like, well, I'm rewarded for the things I already want to do. It's very, very straightforward. I never have to make the decision between trading something on an objective and, doing an action. It's just pure control objectives. And a lot of armies that currently have taken hold that are doing well do that well. They have great OC, they have great ways to get on objectives and flip it, whether it be battle shock or combat or shooting, doesn't really matter. So those two, this kind of we'll harken back to Matt Murrell, our local individual who came up with the triangle of power. But this triangle of power is incredibly important for playing the game. On these 3 objectives, I need to make sure that I'm pressuring and or controlling all 3 of these, and I'm doing that on repeat. because that natural on the top side can be very easy for me to control, right? I can springboard from a lot of different locations, but if I can control one and my home, that's two. So I'm already getting my primary pretty much guaranteed. And if I can flip this one, which is very hard for my opponent to springboard into, I'm putting myself in a very strong position.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I think as as a priority player and stuff, that I need to hold one. When I look at this board, the easiest one for me to hold is actually that center objective and stuff that's out there right in front of my home objective, because it's a lot harder for them to really get on there and deny me, because I can just be hiding behind that wall and
Yeah.
fairly uninteractable. It's a lot more of a commitment to put your units on your, like, for the taken hold player to put their units in the center of the board, and then springboard them all the way across to the backside of that without just being like, oh, well, now I just definitively lose that thing, because it's so easy for the priority player to deal with if it really comes across there. As soon as it's just standing on the open side of that terrain piece, if you're just trying to deny me, sure, you might have denied me my 4 points, but that's also saying that, like, I don't have some other things that are on my technical natural to trying to hold that and stuff. It just, I think that's actually the key objective as the priority player, that you're trying to just be like, I definitively have some good OC and a reasonably tough unit on the backside of that center objective, because it's so much harder to dig out than the natural. Because those naturals, as Phil was talking about, it's so easy to stage and then just go get on it, whether it's OC or whatever. Like, I think it's way less guaranteed to hold those naturals than it is to hold that center objective. And if they do try to deny the center, great, you're scoring 2 points. And
Yeah.
also, it's just so much easier to deal with them. That is a wide open ruin to shoot on. It's easy to go charge things, right? You can load up so much in that pocket for both, for either player, that right behind those center objectives, you can really stage a ton of threats without really giving up too much in terms of line of sight. It's very hard to see in that pocket.
Yeah. The one thing that scares me about this lane is, let's say, I'm running some kind of a combat army and this central objective is what's covered. You have all these units on the backside and I do manage to charge you. So, like, you have them wrapped all the way around the corner. What I'm most afraid of is my opponent wrapping here to the other side and then using this as a springboard to get after my home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to make sure I've pre-measured this as a whole, that my opponent cannot, they cannot fight you, kill you, and then consolidate onto your home, because that is devastating, because it means they're going to flip your home. It means that they're potentially looking to score more there, and then you're not getting the 2 points on primaries. So if I was a take and hold player and this was something that I saw my opponent doing, and I have a decent combat axe set that I know I can like double stack behind here and line myself up to make sure that I could potentially consolidate onto this back objective, we have to be very cognizant of that, because that would be like a game ending mistake of
Yeah.
not only losing our home but also losing the asset there. And now the screen has gone well beyond what I'm comfortable with, right? Like, if my opponent can deny me from rapid ingressing or deep striking here in the center because they've strung out a unit far enough that it just means that, like, they're gonna touch your home, all of this space is taken. I can't rapid ingress anywhere here. They're threatening to hold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 objectives, and you just don't have the activations to remove them off every single one. It gets very dangerous. So that's why take and hold is so good right now, because like there are plays like that to deny priority assets what they need, which is killing units on central objectives. And take and hold's like, you can't interact with me in the same way I can interact with you. I just got to hold objectives. I know what the game plan is to stop me, but I have multiple ways to stop my opponent, because priority assets currently has 3 lines to score.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why orcs are also doing so insanely good right now, is being able to play take and hold for an army that doesn't want to have to slow down and do actions, who has just built in sticky on boys units, right? They can just hurl themselves at priority assets players and just be like, what you going to do about it? Can you kill me fast enough to outscore me? Because they're doing all their scoring while basically playing Purge the Foe. So it's a very strong combination, and it's really good. If you're playing teams, you should try to make that one of your slots, just so everybody's aware. But yeah, I agree with Phil, right? Like you can't, we do need to add some context. I do think you want to be trying to, hold that middle objective. I think it's the easiest one to deal with, but you have to make sure you're still aware of spacing. You might need to throw a screen in front of that unit still, to where even if they kill your screen and get onto that center objective, you probably still hold it, right? A unit of Bulgrin that can go up to OC2, Deathwing Knights with an Ancient to be high OC. Things like that are really going to be impossible for your opponent to just mulch and then go to your home. So you still need to be playing kind of the right things for the job. But I do think it's something to build into the game plan for holding your central objective as a priority assets player.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Any final thoughts, Lane? We could talk about it. These side lanes, they're the same. They aren't necessarily the best, but they're a little better, right? Like, there is a world where having a shooting asset down the side of the board, whether it be a vehicle or something like that, we could realistically have something in here and draw some lines into some units that are on natural objectives, which isn't the end of the world. Obviously we can come up and touch these things, but really the gameplay for a lot of these shooting assets is coming up and touching the middle and shooting out. But that is a different type of shooting asset. These are Rep X's, Vindicators that you're being a lot more aggressive with than you were in 10th edition, right? Because the terrain is a lot denser, the shooting lanes are a lot shorter, and you have to kind of play off our new shooting mechanics. So yeah.
Yeah. I played into orcs on this board with vehicles, and I was like, well, I need to keep them all on. And it still just, it didn't feel good because it's so hard to get lines of sight and get to where you need to go, and also not be too close to just be like, you just 6-inch advance and touch me, and this just really hurts, but I couldn't, go get you. So I think that's definitely another reason where even if your opponent is playing a pressure army, I think I'm going to keep something off the next time. I left it on because if they sent it turn one, I was like, well, shit, I need the asset, but I still just think you need to be able to show up to get those lines on things reactively.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, final layout. Layout C. We got some Dawn of War, and we have what I would say is a very traditional Dawn of War, something that we've seen multiple times in a lot of different variations. These L's are very common across pretty much all the Dawn of War setups, especially here on these layouts, right? Like, I like these layouts a lot. I don't like Dawn of War, but this is not the end of the world. The only problem is it leaves these edges pretty exposed. And this is the one where the shooting assets can take the best lines. Because if we look at some of these, it's very easy for our opponent to be in a position where, halfway decent, fast shooting asset starts behind this wall. Great. Off the profile. They move 8 inches. They come up and touch, and now they're suddenly threatening central objectives. They're threatening all of this space here, all of the staging areas. This is obviously very, very good, and it's the same thing. They could very easily, if when I played into a non-shooting list, as in they, that Tyranid list that I played into at LSO, right? They didn't have guns. They were 18 inches, so I could literally start on the edge and say, okay, I control this lane. Period. Dot. And now I can just move up, and now I'm taking and punishing all the space that's back here. So your deployment areas are a lot shorter, and your rapid ingress spots are a lot shorter. So yes, is it harder to control space in this with physical bodies? Yes, because some of these areas are very, very open. But it does promote some of these shooting gun lines into being like Imperial Knights, especially, is like I could see everything turn one. I could +3 to move. I can come up. I can touch. I can do my actions as the priority player and just do my actions in the middle and stand there and be like, well, I'm going to kill everything that comes out, which is pretty terrifying for some people.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the most awkward parts of this terrain is actually that the home and the 10-inch ruin, because of where the tall tower is in the center and where the L is, you can't fit most vehicles through that gap right up the center of the board. You can tow on and you can see up that gap, which is nice, but wider vehicles, Redeemers, Repexes, Dorns, like you're just too dang wide to really make that jump a lot of the time, and that's really difficult. So I think that's a thing to keep in mind, because it seems like such a good staging area, but if you need to get aggressive with an asset there, if it can't fit through that gap, you have to go out and around, and it doesn't really feel as effective. But it's just it is a very awkward one, as Phil talked about earlier. Right behind your natural, a great place. You can even just, once your infantry assets have gone and got hidden and are touching and are kind of out of your way, you can just stage right behind your natural, right? Get more aggressive, just, be rotated, hidden, nice and aggressive, but still pretty safe, and can either toe on, you can go, left, right, it doesn't matter. You can just have such good access to good lines of sight. And then obviously the other really good spot, in my opinion, is just the other side of the board. Just starting there, tucked in, it's generally pretty hard for your opponent to get a line of sight on you there. You're going to obviously lean a little bit more towards your home objective than the edge of the board, because that line of sight is a lot tighter. But that's definitely where the shooting assets are going. And then for infiltrators, what I would say is you want to start on your own natural to be able to run forward and kind of screen and stop your opponent, who's probably trying to deny you with an asset that's right in front of the tank that Phil just put there, right? You want to be starting on your natural, run forward a little bit, make sure that you can take some space and guarantee that you're not going to lose your natural. You might even be able to get some more aggressive units at that point staged up into that ruin to really threaten your opponent and start pushing on their side of the board. But yeah, I think when it comes to the mission itself, I think this one is a little bit more take and hold favored. I think it can feel really hard to go dig your opponent out, especially when we talk about those center objectives. If you go ahead and you put a unit, again, with gone to ground behind those L's on the corner of those center objectives, it feels really hard to interact with them. Even with fast melee units, this board has a problem with staging points to effectively go touch those things, unless it's a jump pack unit or something fairly fast with access to advance and charge. It's just, it's so far across that board that's just such another good key spot to just be in.
Yep. No arguments there. It is incredibly tough, and which is crazy because Lane, if I remember correctly, when 11th edition first came out, people looked at Tau and people looked at 11th edition and were like, Tau's gonna dominate. Period. Dot. It's over. You might as well just pack up and go home. But you're telling me that there are some combat armies that can very easily take advantage of the new go to ground mechanic and combat mechanic and just say, hey, I can do what I need to do and I'll be okay. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. Maybe it's like a holdover from 10th edition. I really don't like Dawn of War. I don't like sweeping engagement.
It just feels clunky. I think it would help if some of these maps were a little more balanced and spread out a little better. Like I think those naturals should almost be back, almost touching the deployment line would
Yeah.
help some, and have them a little bit more spread out. The fact that there's just a giant, no, like, just nothing's going on in the bottom left or the top right corner of this map, like, I just had to leave my Gaunt's Ghost sitting there until at least round 3 to make sure something didn't just walk in and shoot the shit out of me from the side of the board. But like, unless you have a lone op that can sit there, it's so hard to just take up that space and deny people without giving up a free line of sight off the edge of the board for whatever's staged behind your L. Like, it's such an awkward freaking map that it is probably my least favorite of the three. I don't really like B that much. A, I think my favorite by far, but this one is just awkward in certain ways. It definitely favors, as Phil was saying, fast melee armies. If you like, you can stage on your natural behind that big ass wall and threaten people's home so freaking easily if you are fast with melee. Like, you can just keep reloading your own natural. Make sure it's just gonna be safe, because who's going to come break your castle of melee? If you're out there taking space, fighting things and stuff, you can really just go get into their denial pieces, keep buying yourself space and stuff. And it's honestly, I think in the inverse, even, you can, I think the key to this board, Phil, in all honesty, is flipping the fucker. Like, whether you want to push up their side of their side of the board, to their natural, or you want to push from your own natural across. Like, personally, I think honestly trying to push into their natural might be the best way, because if we look at that triangle of power, holding your home, holding that one center objective, and holding their natural, technically, I think that triangle of power is the easiest to maintain, because you can still have access to things that can go deny your own natural if they're doing the same thing. But I think I'm going to really start taking this as, my plan for my next practice games and stuff, because the more I've tried playing on this board, it's so hard to play this wide, especially with a shooting army.
Yeah, I think it depends on the shooting army because my Deathwatch really liked these boards.
Yeah, well,
Like,
you can just up down anywhere. You don't count.
exactly.
For us mere walking fuckers, okay? We gotta have a more reliable game plan to where we
That's
can
true.
not move so far and castle our resources in an effective way. Because it was so brutal trying to make sure I'm buying enough space to maintain control of my natural, as well as trying to ever go deny them while, they just have, if they have access to the right units that can just sit there super annoyingly on the backside of that center ruin. For me as the guard player, because of the way, that's the other thing, like even if they just flipped how that L is between their natural and our home, where the dense terrain is makes it such a pain in the ass to actually move shooting resources up to a point where they can see into that natural or see behind their center ruin. Like it's just too damn awkward that it makes it so much harder. I think in general, I think that's going to be one of the biggest shifts we probably see, whether it's 6 months or next year, probably when they redo maps and stuff. I think a lot of the small terrain pieces are going to get downgraded back to just short ruins. I honestly think there's too many tall ruins in the game right now.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I mean, GW has already shown a desire to change the maps in this first balanced status slate. They've split a lot of the ruins and purge. They've done it on a couple other maps, so maybe you'll get your wish. Maybe you'll get it sooner rather than later. I doubt it because a lot of TOs have spent a lot of time and money trying to put together as much terrain as possible to make 11th edition real. So I think a lot of TOs would be pretty upset if all the terrain they just bought would now become obsolete because it got downgraded.
You just have to say that it is something you can drive over. That's it. That's all you got to
It's
do.
true. It's true.
People
Just
have
call it.
crates. I'll just say you can drive over my single crates. It's fine. It just isn't impeding you anymore. For years of Fight Club, we treated crates as just 2-inch ruins. So
Okay, you heard it here first. GW, you are authorized to change your terrain.
please, but yeah.
Okay.
Any final thoughts, Phil? As we're talking here about priority versus take and hold. I think this is one of the rare cases where priority actually is kind of on the back foot when it comes to how a mission is built. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways that armies play priority assets. Like Imperial Knights now has started to move to priority assets because they lost Purge in a lot of locations. The take and hold lists are becoming a lot more traditional. T-Sons, Orcs, you're seeing it on Space Marines. There's a few builds that can take it with them. So you definitely have to be prepared for take and hold. How long will Orcs stay at the top of the meta? I don't know. I expect them to get hit relatively decently, but then they're going to get a brand new codex. So what that codex is going to look like in conjunction with like the changes in the balanced data slate, we would be guessing at that point. But what I will say now is the priority player, what you need to be prepared for is you need to be prepared to control your objectives and prevent your opponent from actually getting on them and flipping them. And if they do flip them, you need to make sure you're in a position to get the maximum points out of it. You need to be able to kill the unit that comes out there and steps on it. But that's going to be very hard for some armies. Like, okay, can you kill 10 Terminators on an objective? Some armies can't do that. Can you kill 20 boys in the WOG with a 5-up invul, 5-up Feel Pain, and the character? Some armies can't do that. So, like, I was talking to people from this weekend about, like, why I chose the things that I did. But, like, the considerations I'm making aren't necessarily always based on the points of the unit. It's the tools that I need to play into certain matchups. So, like, you as the priority player need to be able to either control your objectives with spacing, screening, or lethality, or good OC, whatever the case is. And then you also, on the flip side, need to make sure that if something does come out on a central objective, you need to be able to kill it because you still have to control your natural. You cannot let the take and hold player take it. Because if they do, they're already going to put you on the back foot. And like we said before, they're doing the thing that they want to do to score points. And if they survive, they're even happier about it because that means that they're going to score max primary. And as Lane went out and showed us, right, like they pretty much max primary just by breathing, right?
Yeah.
They're just out on objectives. So as a priority player, you got to be pretty aggressive, right? Like I think there's a world where you need to go in and you need to pick off multiple assets a turn. You need to actually get them down to their home objective. And there's some armies that can't do that.
Yeah, the best take and hold armies are great purge armies, in my opinion. Things that can just run across the board and kill the shit out of you. They're gonna hold some points and stuff. And as a priority player, you need to strike first if you can. Realizing if you are playing maybe a take and hold army that maybe isn't quite so purgy or as damagey, make sure that you are being a more aggressive player. I realized I should have done that into the Plague Legion player this last weekend. Is I needed to take more control in terms of tempo and just push a little bit more. And I think I would have been in a better position instead of trying to just make sure I'm holding out and getting my points. I needed to just put the pedal to the floor and just go take space and put it on them to remove me. And try to go from there. I think that's one of the bigger things about this mission is you really got to understand what your opponent's army does in order for them to take and hold those objectives. So yeah, I think that's really important. But yeah, that is it for take and hold versus priority assets. We hope you enjoyed this video. We're going to have more in this series coming soon. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please comment. Tell us how your games have been going. That really all helps us out. Join us in the Discord. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, do not forget that victory isn't given, it is forged, and is forged right here at Mastercrafted. We will see you all next time.
See you guys.